Every night in millions of kitchens all over the world, a familiar chore plays out. You finish a great meal, scrape the plates, stack them inside a box, press a single button, and walk away. That little machine sits there under the counter, humming quietly in the dark, doing the one job almost everyone on earth hates to do. It feels like it has always been there. It feels completely ordinary. But if you look closely at that metal box, you are actually looking at the survival of a legacy that almost broke a family, defied the entire engineering world of the 19th century, and started with a woman who had never worked a day in her life standing over a sink, furious about her chipped china. To understand how we got here, I want to take you back to a time when washing a dish wasn't just a chore. It was a daily battle that left people with bleeding hands, ruined health, and a deep sense of dread. Picture yourself walking into an American kitchen in the 1850s. The first thing that hits you isn't the smell of wood smoke or baking bread. It is the sheer volume of labor. There are no running water taps, no synthetic detergents, and absolutely no breaks. If you wanted to clean a single plate, you had to haul water from an outdoor pump, heat it over a roaring wood stove, shave off chunks of harsh lye soap by hand, and scrub until your fingers were raw. It was a brutal, relentless cycle. For the average woman, this wasn't just a part of the day. It was life. Hours upon hours were swallowed up by grease, boiling water, and cold air. I often think about how much human potential was simply washed down the drain in those decades. Brilliant minds, artistic talents, and incredible leaders spent their entire existence trapped at the kitchen sink. People accepted it because they thought there was no other choice. Grains had to be ground, wood had to be chopped, and dishes had to be scrubbed. That was the unwritten rule of human survival. But that began to change when a few inventors looked at the steam engines pulling trains across the country and asked a simple question. If a machine can move a mountain of coal, why can't it wash a plate? The early attempts to answer that question were, frankly, complete disasters. In 1850, a man named Joel Houghton patented a device made of wood. You lined your dishes up inside it, closed the lid, and turned a hand crank. The crank turned a wheel that splashed a little bit of water over the plates. That should have solved the problem. Instead, it created an even bigger one. Houghton's machine didn't actually clean anything. It just sprayed lukewarm water around, soaking the kitchen floor and leaving the dishes covered in a greasy film. It was slow, it leaked, and it required more physical effort to crank the machine than it did to just wash the plates by hand. A few years later, another inventor tried using a series of mechanical brushes to scrub the plates inside a tub. It worked about as well as you can imagine. The machine didn't clean the dishes, it shattered them. For a long time, the entire idea of a mechanical dishwasher became a joke among engineers. It was seen as an impossible dream, a foolish gadget that would never work in the real world. The experts said that human hands possessed a delicate touch that a machine could never replicate. They believed the problem was fundamentally unsolvable. Everything was about to change because of a woman who didn't care what the experts thought. Her name was Josephine Cochrane, and she did not grow up in a dark, smoky kitchen. She was born into wealth and lived a comfortable life in Illinois. Her husband was a successful politician and businessman. They lived in a large mansion, hosted massive dinner parties, and owned beautiful, expensive heirloom china that dated back to the 1600s. Josephine didn't wash her own dishes. She had servants to do that. But after every dinner party, she noticed something that made her blood boil. Her priceless heirloom plates were coming back to the cupboard with small chips and cracks. The servants were rushing, the soap was slippery, and the delicate porcelain was paying the price. Frustrated, Josephine decided to wash the dishes herself one evening. Imagine her standing there at the sink, surrounded by stacks of greasy platters, dipping her hands into the scorching, soapy water. She hated it. She hated the steam in her face, the slippery mess, and the sheer amount of time it took to clean each individual piece. But as she stood there scrubbing, she didn't just see a miserable chore. She saw a massive flaw in the way humanity lived. She realized that the entire approach to washing dishes was wrong. Human beings were spending hours rubbing a cloth against a plate, using friction to remove grease. But friction required a human hand to hold the dish, which meant the water couldn't be too hot or it would burn the skin. Because the water wasn't hot enough, the grease didn't dissolve easily, which meant you had to scrub harder, which caused the dishes to break. Josephine realized the secret wasn't scrubbing at all. The secret was water pressure and heat. If you could hold the dishes completely still and blast them with boiling soapy water under immense pressure, the grease would melt away on its own, without anything ever touching the surface of the plate. She stepped away from the sink, dried her hands, and reportedly said aloud, "If nobody else is going to invent a dishwashing machine, I'll do it myself." At first, this seemed like a harmless boast from a wealthy woman looking for a hobby. It wasn't. That decision would shape history for centuries. But to build a machine that could achieve that kind of pressure, Josephine needed help. She didn't have a background in mechanical engineering. What she did have, however, was a family history of defiance. Her grandfather was John Fitch, the brilliant, stubborn inventor who had created the first operational steamboat in America. Engineering was quite literally in her blood. She walked out to the wood shed behind her mansion, sat down with a stack of paper, and began to sketch. Look around that woodshed. It is damp, cold, and smells of sawdust and oil. Josephine is sitting there under an oil lamp, working alongside a local mechanic named George Butters. The design they came up with was incredibly elegant. First, she measured her dishes and constructed custom wire compartments. There were specific slots for plates, cups, and saucers. This was the breakthrough the earlier inventors had missed. By holding the dishes firmly in place inside a cage, they wouldn't rattle around and smash into each other when the water hit them. Next, she placed that wire cage inside a large copper boiler. Beneath the cage, she installed a wheel connected to a hand crank on the outside of the machine. When you turned the crank, the wheel acted as a pump, drawing boiling soapy water from the bottom of the boiler and forcing it upward through a series of nozzles, blasting the dishes from every angle. It was a brilliant piece of engineering. But just as the first prototype was nearing completion, tragedy struck. Josephine's husband suddenly passed away. When she looked into his business accounts, she discovered a terrifying truth. He had been deeply in debt. The mansion, the lifestyle, the financial security she had known her entire life vanished overnight. She was left with a few dollars to her name, a mountain of bills, and an unfinished wooden prototype in her backyard shed. She had two choices. She could sell off her remaining possessions, move into a tiny apartment, and accept a life of quiet poverty. Or she could stake everything she had left on a machine that the world's leading engineers said would never work. She chose the machine. In 1886, the United States Patent Office granted Josephine Cochrane her patent. She called her invention the Garris-Cochrane dishwashing machine. But getting a patent was the easy part. Selling it was an entirely different story. Imagine being a woman in the late 1800s trying to pitch a heavy mechanical invention to a room full of male factory owners, hotel managers, and investors. They didn't see an engineer. They saw a grieving widow who belonged in a parlor, not a machine shop. When she walked into meetings, men would openly laugh at her or try to buy the patent from her for pennies, assuming she was desperate. But Josephine refused to back down. She knew her machine worked because she was using it in her own home. She realized that individual housewives weren't her market yet. Most homes didn't have water heaters that could supply enough boiling water to run the machine, and ordinary families couldn't afford the steep price tag. So, she aimed higher. She went after the biggest hotels and restaurants in Chicago. Her first big break came when she managed to get a meeting with the manager of the prestigious Palmer House Hotel in Chicago. She walked into his office alone, pulled out her blueprints, and explained exactly how much money his hotel was losing every single week on chipped plates and broken glassware. The manager was skeptical, but he agreed to try one machine. It was an instant triumph. The machine didn't just wash the dishes faster. It sterilized them with water so hot that the plates dried instantly when they were pulled out of the boiler, saving hours of manual towel drying. Within weeks, the Palmer House ordered more. Word spread like wildfire through the hospitality industry. Soon, hospitals, colleges, and massive restaurants across the Midwest were clamoring for Josephine's invention. If you've made it this far, you're probably the kind of person who enjoys discovering the hidden stories behind everyday things. That's exactly what we explore here every week. So if you haven't already, consider subscribing. Now, because what happened next changed everything. By 1893, Josephine was ready for the ultimate test. Chicago was hosting the world's Columbian Exposition, a massive world's fair that would attract over 27 million visitors from every corner of the globe. It was the birthplace of the Ferris wheel, the place where electricity was shown to the masses, and the ultimate battleground for new technology. Josephine saved every dollar she had to rent a space in the machinery hall. She installed several of her commercial dishwashers and offered to wash the dishes for the fair's massive restaurants for free, just to show what her invention could do. Picture the scene inside that great hall. The air is thick with the smell of coal smoke, hot grease, and ozone. Thousands of people are walking past giant steam engines, printing presses, and electrical generators. And there, standing beside a gleaming copper boiler, is Josephine Cochrane, operating her machine. People were stunned. They watched as hundreds of greasy plates went into the metal cage, disappeared into the boiler, and emerged less than 2 minutes later, sparkling clean and scorching hot. The judges at the fair were so impressed that they awarded her the grand prize for mechanical ingenuity, beating out male inventors from all over the world. That should have been the moment the dishwasher entered every home in America. Instead, the machine hit a wall that technology couldn't fix. Despite her success at the World's Fair, Josephine couldn't get her machine into ordinary households. The reason had nothing to do with the dishwasher itself. It was the infrastructure of the American home. In the early 1900s, the average house was still primitive. Most homes didn't have indoor plumbing. If you wanted water, you still had to carry it inside in buckets. Even the homes that did have pipes didn't have automatic water heaters. If you wanted hot water, you had to boil it on the stove first. Josephine's machine required a steady, massive flow of boiling water to operate correctly. Without it, the dishwasher was just an expensive, heavy storage box. Furthermore, the soap of the era was terrible for machines. Standard bar soap left a thick, gummy residue that clogged the nozzles and coated the dishes in a white film. The chemical industry simply hadn't caught up to the mechanical industry. Josephine spent the rest of her life refining her machines, building a factory, and fighting to keep her company alive. She passed away in 1913 at the age of 73, having never seen her invention become a standard feature in the average kitchen. Her company was eventually acquired by an appliance giant you might recognize today, KitchenAid. The real transformation didn't happen until the 1950s. The post-war economic boom changed everything. Suddenly, suburbs were exploding, and new homes were being built with modern plumbing, reliable electricity, and dedicated water heaters as standard features. At the same time, chemical companies finally invented specialized detergents that could dissolve grease without creating mountains of foam or leaving a residue. By the 1960s and 70s, the dishwasher went from an expensive luxury for the elite to the ultimate symbol of the modern, efficient home. The dark, endless grind of the kitchen sink was finally broken. It is easy to look at a dishwasher today and see nothing more than a boring appliance, a white or stainless steel square that takes up space under the counter. We walk past it every day without giving it a single thought. But the next time you hear that familiar hum coming from your kitchen, give it 1 extra second. You are looking at the end of a long, historic battle. Behind that quiet machine stands the story of millions of women who spent their lives trapped in the invisible grind of manual labor. It is the story of an elite widow who lost everything but refused to let a room full of men tell her what she could build. It is the legacy of a backyard woodshed, a grand prize at a world's fair, and a brilliant realization that water pressure could achieve what human hands never could. We began with a furious woman standing over a sink of chipped china, staring at a chore that had broken spirits for thousands of years. And we ended with a quiet, automated victory that sits in almost every wall around us, asking for no attention at all. It succeeded so completely that we forgot it was ever a miracle. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments what surprised you the most. And if you'd like another hidden chapter of history, there's another story waiting for you.